Ever wondered why the jukebox legends who built country music seem to be born with perfect stage names? The truth is, most of those steel guitar heroes and rhinestone queens walked into Nashville offices carrying driver's licenses that would have stumped their biggest fans. Hiram King Williams, for example, sounded more like a small-town preacher than the hillbilly Shakespeare whose voice could crack 1,000 hearts. Back in 1937, a radio promoter told the lanky Alabama teenager that Hank sat friendlier on a record sleeve, so Hiram vanished. Hank was born, and the Opry lights never looked back. Virginia Patterson Hensley got similar advice, but hers came wrapped in romance. Richmond barrooms already knew her as Ginny, yet managers swore the name was too prim for the high-stakes Opry circuit. When she married Gerald Klein, she borrowed his last name and shortened Virginia to Patsy, lifting the syllable from her own neglected middle name. Patsy Cline rolled through speakers like a convertible on a summer highway, and by the time Crazy hit #1, listeners would have sworn she'd been Patsy since the cradle. Not every rebrand was that polite. Harold Lloyd Jenkins sat at a kitchen table one night thumbing a Rand McNally atlas, desperate for something catchy. He jabbed a finger at Conway, Arkansas, then at Twitty, Texas, mashed the two together and laughed at how oddly perfect it sounded. The next morning, he told a Memphis DJ that he was now Conway Twitty. By sunset, the station was spinning his single, and thousands of listeners assumed he'd ridden in from some mythical border town no map could pin down. Ernest Jennings Ford didn't need an atlas. The record label simply stamped Tennessee on him like a freight tag and shipped him to the nation as Tennessee Ernie Ford, banking on state pride to pull in listeners. Woodward Maurice Ritter got a similar nudge. Hollywood executives slapped Tex onto his marquee because nothing screams cowboy louder than the Lone Star brand. It worked. Within a season, Tex Ritter's crooning growl defined the silver screen range, and kids in matinee lines copied the name onto lunchboxes. Some transformations were pure swagger. Donald Eugene Lytle walked into a bar fight of a career and walked out calling himself Johnny Paycheck, stealing a lightweight boxer's moniker to advertise that he'd punch through any jukebox that skipped his song. When reporters asked if the tough new name matched his legal ID, Johnny just grinned. The grin dimmed years later when real court paychecks went missing and legal troubles piled up, but by then the alias was welded to outlaw lore. William Orville Frizell found his outlaw image in a playground tall tale. According to legend, he decked a bully with a southpaw swing, earning the nickname Lefty. Historians whisper that the whole scuffle was staged by a crafty promoter, but the public loved the brawny backstory. Every time Lefty Frizzell leaned into a heartbreak ballad, fans pictured a scar-knuckled drifter who could flatten a foe at noon and sob into a beer by dusk. Liesl Travis Martin chose an even dustier persona. After hearing a yard worker describe a disheveled serviceman his train had rattled past, "Looked like some boxcar Willie," Martin lifted the phrase, "wholesale." He rubbed charcoal on his cheeks, donned a tattered railroad cap, and hit county fairs as Boxcar Willie, singing about hobos while the wheels of his personal tour bus gleamed like polished silver nearby. Clarence Eugene Snow saw those gimmicks and still felt plain. His friends joked that Clarence sounded like an accountant. So he trimmed the account book and borrowed Hank from the king of honky-tonk, betting the public had room for two Hanks. It was risky, but Hank Snow's Yukon ballads snowballed southward until even the Grand Ole Opry welcomed another Hank under its neon arch. Image mattered just as much for the women fighting to be heard over fiddles and brass. Ellen Muriel Deason reread a 19th century ballad about sweet Kitty Wells and fell in love with the name's storytelling charm. When her label tried to brand her as an answer to the cheating song craze, Kitty Wells felt both innocent and sly, perfect armor for a woman singing scandal from a woman's point of view. Sarah Ophelia Colley, by contrast, leaned into comedy, stitching gingham dresses and introducing herself as Minnie Pearl, a church bazaar gossip come to life. James William Anderson III never bothered hiding the surname, he just whispered the rest. Producers noticed his soft delivery during rehearsal and slapped "whisperin" in front of Bill Anderson. The airy nickname became a marketing masterstroke, turning breathy restraint into a headline. Loretta Webb took an easier path. She married Oliver Lynn, grabbed his surname, and rolled it into a logo that fit every billboard from Butcher Holler to Hollywood. Fans didn't care that Lynn came from a marriage certificate. They just wanted the coal miner's daughter to keep belting truths. Noble Ray Price worried his first name sounded too aristocratic for roadhouse crowds, so he lopped off Noble, cut deals with Ray alone, and watched dancers two-step across Texas to his velvet baritone. Dorothy Marie Marsh found a similar rhythm in Dottie West. Short, punchy, and friendly, it clung to vinyl grooves like sugar to a warm biscuit. Jerry Reed Hubbard dropped the Hubbard entirely, claiming the shorter tag would look bigger on a record sleeve, and he was right. Alvis Edgar Owens Jr. had been called Buck since toddler days. When a Bakersfield producer begged him to keep the nickname, Buck Owens figured he might as well brand the grin he'd never quite shake. Mary Frances Pennock laughed off mosquito jokes and leaned straight into Skeeter Davis, a name that buzzed its way onto crossover charts. Martin David Robinson watched fellow crooners shorten every name in sight, so he clipped his to Marty Robbins, easy to rhyme, easy to chant, impossible to forget when painted on a race car hood. John Gale Horton barely adjusted anything. Johnny sounded boyish and breezy, charm in one syllable. The smallest tweak on a birth certificate sometimes made the biggest splash. And then there was Billy Joe Shaver, who changed nothing because destiny had already handed him the perfect outlaw brand. The problem? Reporters refused to believe it was real. More than once he flashed his ID to prove the universe had stamped him with a stage name at birth. He liked to grin and say, "Even when I try to be honest, people assume I'm marketing." Stage names weren't the only masks. Rumor mills buzzed with half-truths about substances, fistfights, and backstage feuds. Tales as sticky as spilled bourbon. Take Hank Williams again. Whisper campaigns claimed lingering injuries had him chasing pain pills with moonshine years before stardom, a habit that fed the lonely heartbreak dripping from his lyrics. Patsy Cline's plane crash sealed her legend, but some biographers insist label pressure pushed her to fly in gnarly weather, all because promoters hated to cancel a Saturday billing. Johnny Paycheck's scrapes with the law grew so intertwined with his alias that fans assumed the name itself landed him in handcuffs. The line between branding and biography blurred until no one could tell where the suits ended and the scars began. These stories blurred the line between branding and being. Once a singer strapped on a new name, the old life sometimes dissolved. Friends from Hiram's high school days noticed he began signing autographs Hank even in personal letters. Virginia's diary entries switched to Patsy by habit, like she was narrating her own legend. Harold Jenkins told a journalist he hadn't heard anyone call him Harold in 10 years, except maybe the IRS. Could he still be Harold inside? He paused, shrugged, and let the silence answer. Yet the brand alchemy worked. A two-syllable handle could steer a career from beer hall obscurity to coast-to-coast radio rotation. Promoters knew that when audiences repeated a name, they were halfway to buying the record. Tennessee Ernie Ford's version of 16 Tons sold 10 million copies. Analysts later argued the prefix Tennessee alone was worth 1 million of those sales, buzzing a state's pride with every spin. Tex Ritter leveraged his alias into movie roles where he sang from a saddle against backlot sunsets. Boxcar Willie's persona sold sawdust floor theaters even when disco ruled the charts. Brand equity, the modern marketers call it, but old-timers just said the name felt right. Ironically, the system that minted myths could also imprison. Lefty Frizzell struggled whenever he tried crooner ballads. Radio programmers pigeonholed a lefty as rough and rowdy. Dottie West, desperate to shed the Girl Next Door label, once cut a sultry crossover album that her label shelved for being too undotty. Skeeter Davis fought producers who assumed a woman with a buggy nickname ought to sing novelty tunes. Even Billy Joe Shaver, armed with authenticity, felt forced to posture harder just to prove the legend true. The alias could open doors but also weld them shut behind you. Behind closed studio doors, the branding calculus grew ruthless. A&R men rolled vowel sounds on their tongues the way gamblers test dice. They weighed how a surname looked in Gothic font on a county fair poster. They quizzed rural focus groups, probing which nicknames sounded trustworthy enough to buy a used tractor from. Clarence, Noble, Dorothy. Too formal, too fussy, too grandma. Hank, Buck, Dottie, Homie, Punchy, Easy. One exec famously kept a chalkboard divided into columns: 2 syllables, 3 syllables, geographic hook, animal hook, outlaw hook. By noon, he had Boxcar Willie circled in red before Martin even walked through the door. Sometimes spin collided with serendipity. While touring Canada, Clarence Eugene Snow noticed concert flyers accidentally printed Hank Snow. Rather than demand a reprint, he tested the alias on stage and felt the applause spike. By tour's end, he legally changed it, joking that destiny must have snowed him under into a new identity. In Bakersfield, Alvis Owens heard bar patrons chanting "Buck" whenever his dog wandered near the stage. The bark-inspired nickname clung so tightly he scraped it onto his guitar case and never looked back. Fans, meanwhile, devoured every tall tale, never quite sure what was truth. A popular 1960 rumor claimed Johnny Paycheck chose his name after a bar tab so huge he could have paid a check bigger than Texas. Paycheck never confirmed or denied. Why ruin a legend that sold concert tickets? Similarly, stories circulated that Patsy Cline picked her alias because it rhymed with "shine," a nod to backwoods spirits. In truth, the rhyme never crossed Virginia's mind, but the fib fit the honky-tonk fantasy too neatly to die. Even health scandals got brand spins. When reporters hinted at Roy Rogers battling dependency on pain medicine after stunt injuries, press agents quietly replaced certain words, calling it a string of rough nights. Whisper in Bill Anderson's gentle persona shielded him from gossip about chronic exhaustion. Publicists labeled it a whisper-sized setback. The industry understood algorithmic moderation long before the internet. Soften the edges, tweak the vocabulary, keep the illusion family-friendly. As rock and pop stormed the airwaves, older stars confronted a dilemma: modernize or fossilize. Some tweaked their brands again. Tex Ritter's team pushed him as America's original cowboy to counter shiny pop cowboys in fringe jackets. Skeeter Davis leaned into introspective folk anthems, marketing Skeeter not as a pesky bug, but as a free spirit buzzing through changing times. Buck Owens painted his Telecaster red, white, and blue and rebranded as patriotic core of the Bakersfield sound. Every shift proved that a good alias could bend without breaking. Yet authenticity kept leaking through. During a late-night TV interview, Lefty Frizzell confessed he sometimes missed William, the kid who wrote love poems in study hall. Hank Snow admitted he still heard his mother whisper "Clarence, wash up for supper" in his dreams. Loretta Lynn wrote an entire memoir under her married stage name, but began the dedication with "To my mom, Clara Webb." Johnny Paycheck, facing prison time, shocked reporters by signing court documents Donald Eugene Lytle, perhaps hoping the judge might see a repentant man beneath the mask. Fans forgave the contradictions because the music felt true. A 3-chord confession can eclipse any marketing stunt. When Kitty Wells sang "It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels," nobody cared whether Ellen Deason or Kitty Wells delivered the line, the lyric cut through. Conway Twitty's silky "Hello Darlin'" sounded like Harold Jenkins had memorized every heartbreak in that atlas. Those seams between alias and soul gave the songs their ache. Today, branding gurus dissect these legends as case studies. They chart data, showing that monosyllabic first names increased radio mentions, that a state nickname added immediate regional loyalty, that swapping uncommon surnames for simple Anglo stand-ins widened crossover potential. They hail Boxcar Willie as an early master of immersive cosplay marketing. Credit Hank and Patsy as pioneers of single-name recognizability decades before Madonna and Beyoncé. What the graphs can't measure are the late-night doubts. Did Patsy ever whisper Virginia to herself in the dark? Did Hank hear Hiram echo in an empty auditorium after the crowd went home? Maybe those ghosts fueled the music, turning simple chords into lifelines. Modern audiences might assume the Alias game ended with rhinestones, but the tradition marches on under LED lights and streaming stats. Country rap crooner Jason McCannytown can trace his meteoric climb to the moment he sliced 4 syllables from his Polish surname, while banjo prodigy Indigo June was once legally Judith Juneapple until a TikTok consultant trimmed the orchard. The principles haven't changed. Shorter names rank higher in search bars, and evocative imagery converts casual scrollers into superfans. Label interns still brainstorm geography, critter nicknames, and outlaw lore before an artist ever tunes a guitar. Brand physics outpaces genre boundaries every year. Perhaps that tension is the secret ingredient. Country music was forged in rail yards and chapel pews, places where stories grow taller than wheat. A stage name is just another verse in the ballad, a promise that the singer belongs to the crowd's imagination now. When the lights dim and the final chord fades, the alias lingers in the air, echoing against rafters until someone stacks the chairs and locks the door, leaving a silence where both the legend and the birth name can finally breathe. Names may flicker, but the souls behind them keep playing, sometimes long after the stage lights cut out. Picture a shadow-lit bar in some nameless county tonight. On the jukebox, those aliases spin like well-worn quarters, and a fresh crop of dreamers hum along, tasting the future in each syllable. Among them might be a shy kid called Roscoe or Annabeth, scribbling lyrics on a napkin while wondering whether either name will ever glow in LEDs. They'll Google short, punchy stage names, test initials in smartphone logos, and ask a bartender if Skylar Trail sounds believable. The bartender will tilt a beer glass, share the myth of Hank and Patsy, and whisper that new legends begin with a single leap of faith and a good hook. It does. Even in the streaming century, a handle that pops can still pry open curiosity, can still nudge a stranger's thumb toward the play button. That's why marketing reps now comb data sets, counting syllables, measuring click rates, cross-matching first-name vowels with listener retention. It's why a bedroom producer in Nebraska rebrands as Neon Sage, why a New Mexico fiddler registers domain names for Desert Dusk before uploading a single track. The old chalkboard has become a spreadsheet, but the gamble is identical. Bet on a name, polish it, and pray the chorus delivers. Some will outgrow their chosen masks, aching to return to birth names once the spotlight burns too bright. Others, like Hiram and Virginia, will vanish inside the legend, finding comfort in the armor of reinvention. The music world never settles that debate. It only keeps adding verses. When the shy kid from the nameless bar finally releases a debut EP, listeners won't hear Roscoe's homework worries or Annabeth's small-town shy, just the shiny alias echoing through earbuds. If the songs bite deep enough, the real story will surface someday in an interview, and another myth will join the country canon. And so the wheel turns. New names slide onto playlists while the classics keep circling, proving that a well-aimed alias is more than paint on the door. It's the key that keeps the jukebox roaring all night. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.